Hi, welcome to Ketobiography. I'm your host, Robyn. Today's guest is an experienced licensed mental health counselor who integrates ketogenic metabolic therapy with traditional psychotherapy to support individuals facing mental illness and neurological challenges. She has published numerous peer reviewed clinical case studies exploring ketogenic metabolic therapy for treatment resistant depression, bipolar disorder, and other mental illnesses. In addition, she founded Brain Fog Recovery Source, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing education and support for recovery from cognitive impairment and brain fog through metabolic therapy and nutrition. Please welcome Nicole Laurent to Ketobiography. Hello, Nicole. And the first thing I was supposed to do before we started recording was make sure I said your last name correctly because I've heard it 1,000 different ways. Do you just
Oh,
go like, don't call me whatever you want, just don't call me late for dinner kind of thing?
exactly. That's my policy. Yeah.
Okay, well, good. You're not late for dinner for sure. And welcome. I'm so glad that you are here to talk to us today. Um, what I usually do is just like turn it over to my guest. I would just love hearing the stories. And I know you're a professional in this space, but I love hearing the personal story, why you started doing what you're doing. So if you could give us some background into you and your personal journey, and we'll talk about all the other stuff as we go on.
Yeah. Well, that's a big question. So let's see. Um, I I always thought prior to myself doing ketogenic metabolic therapies that I was just someone who had kind of really low energy and low motivation and all these other types of things that I decided was just part of my personality kind of growing up. And Um, what I found out later after I started using ketogenic metabolic therapies for something that I was going through was very different, apparently. So I really started using ketogenic therapies after I heard. I'll probably say the story in a roundabout way, which I know people do their stories in roundabout ways. But so I learned about ketogenic metabolic therapy listening to podcasts. Dom DiAgostino was on STEM Talk and was talking about ketogenic therapies, and he was talking about the benefits of it for Alzheimer's disease. And at the time that I was listening to that podcast, I had just come through something actually pretty horrendous. It's not something that I think I've talked about this maybe just once or twice in all the mini podcasts that I've kind of done. But I had gone through a good 14 years, I think it was, if I had to try to remember the exact, but it was a very long time that I had been on pain medication because I had trigeminal neuralgia. I developed it the first semester of my graduate program in clinical psychology, which was terrible timing, and tried all the different things and eventually was talked into going on some pain medication just to cope because that's a very painful condition. I had daily migraines with it. So I was quite debilitated and quite desperate and really wanting to learn and really wanting to get through my program. So I went on the medications and I just happened to be one of those human beings that would habituate to them very quickly. So I would get some relief and then within just weeks, suddenly I needed the dose up. And I had tried, of course, they moved me around to different types of medications. And I had a couple experiences where I'm quite sure that I almost overdosed. And I've never talked about that before, but I remember there being, I was in bed with, laying next to my husband. And I remember feeling like I kept having to swim up to the surface in order to just continue. I know that's a very weird thing to say, but that's really what it felt like. And that happened a couple of times. And so these pain medications were awful. And they take their toll over time metabolically, and people don't understand that. And there's no informed consent. And I was absolutely reassured. I was crying in the doctor's office when they very first said, you're just going to have to go on these medications. We don't have anything for you. And I said, are you sure? Do you promise I can get off of these easily? And they were like, yes, absolutely. We will titrate you down. It will be no problem. Well, eventually, eventually I did my own research as usual, and I found that there was these devices called neurostimulators. And so I did my research, and back then people just didn't even have insurance, right? So my family saved up a couple years for the medical insurance that we could purchase in order for me to get a operation that was like $40,000 or whatever crazy amount it is nowadays. And I had a neurostimulator implanted. And I just want to be clear to your audience that my trigeminal neuralgia was not fixed with ketogenic metabolic therapy. That came later. So the neurostimulator reprogrammed those nerves. It worked very well. It should have been offered to me immediately. Immediately, it should have been an option. Never put on the table. The technology had existed for decades and decades, and I did not get access to it. Medications were pushed on me as really the only option. So anyways, I was much better. I did not have daily migraines anymore, but I was stuck on this pain medication. And they attempted to detox me on it with first it was, I think it's Suboxone. There was several times where we attempted that and it did not work. And my liver got very in bad shape. Like my liver enzymes were through the roof, and they're like, "Oh, you can't take this. We can't detox you off this." And then they put me on, I believe it was Subutex, which is what they give the ladies who are pregnant who are trying to detox off of opioids, because it's a little bit easier on the liver, and that did the trick. And but I was stuck on the last, I think it was 0.25 or whatever it was, just like all my lovely patients or my clients that I see for psychiatric stuff, they go through that last bit of titration, and it's very difficult. But for me, I was stuck on that for years, on that last little bit, and there were real ramifications for me. So my life got really small and completely revolved around those doses of the Subutex that I had to have 3 times a day. And what that looked like for me in private practice as a psychotherapist was I would wake up in the middle, in the early morning, take my dose, sit up a little bit with it, because I don't know so some of your people probably don't know this, but the medication tastes really awful. You have to put it under your tongue. And I would sit up a little bit in bed with my cat or something, trying to like get that done. And it's a constant nausea. So as that medication wears off, you are hit with flu-like symptoms. So I would do that in the morning. I would run to work nearby in my office for about 3 hours. That's all I could do, because then the next dose was required. And I would have to run home, take it with my cat Lola, who looked forward to this time, I think, because he knew I was going to fall asleep. So I would fall asleep. I would take a little nap while I was absorbing that medication. I would get up, I would make some lunch, and then I would go back to work for about 3 hours. And then I would come home, eat dinner, and then I would have to have some before bed. So it was really a small life. And when we would travel, which was not very often, you'd have to, arrange your activities around, I was a mom. Oh, mom's got to go take her medication in the hotel room, right? People just really don't understand how these medications limit people's quality of life. So anyways, I had really resolved myself to, I'm just going to have to stay on these medications my whole life. Like, I'm stuck, whatever, I'm just going to have my best life possible. So when my clients are in that place where they're just not even daring to hope, or they're just not even like willing to explore what could work, I totally get it, because I've been there, and sometimes it's just best to radically accept where you are for a little while, and regroup. So that's where I was. But then my husband got a good job down in Vancouver, Washington, which is where I live now. And there's a big issue around prescribing of opioids. And my doctor was really concerned that I would not be able to find a prescriber down here. And he knew that I was not detoxing well, and that was going to be a big problem. And then it's kind of, like the universe kind of provides it, because he said, I just spoke to this other doctor. I believe his name was Dr. Marcus, but he was in the Bellevue area of Washington, and he has this experimental protocol that he is using to detoxify people off of this Suboxone and Subutex. And I thought, well, sign me up. Let's do this, because, the timing was good and I really wanted to get off of it. And I went through that detox and I thought I was going to die. It was awful. One of the worst things. I mean, I literally, as it was happening, I like really kind of felt in my gut that I was dying. I, of course, said this to the doctor and he laughed. He was not a particularly empathetic human. He was sure I was not dying, but I was quite sure. It was just awful. And it lasted 3 or 4 days. And when I got out of that, I was detoxed off, but I was completely debilitated for a good month. So the clients that I had to just say, I am ill. I cannot see you anymore, and I'm about to move. So ethically, that was awful because I just left them hanging. There was no warning that I was going to be couch ridden. I lost a lot of weight because I could not eat very well because of the effects that detox and going off that medication had on my digestive system. So I got quite small, about, I think, 97 pounds by the time it was done. My older daughter had to make food for me. I had trouble getting to the bathroom. It was so bad. Like, it was just it was ridiculous how bad a shape I was in. And cognitively, I was decimated. So, when I began my graduate program, I was one of those people who could visualize what page the passage was I wanted on and remembered the page number. And that was not the case after many, many, many years of those medications, and particularly that detox process. So they, as part of that detox process, for a while, they do put you on some different medications, some different psychiatric medications for sleep and stuff, to just kind of help you adjust. And I, of course, got off of those as soon as I could. So I have developed a very healthy fear of those types of medications, because, just like the clients I work with, there's been a lack of informed consent and some damage that's been done. And so, yeah, so my brain just did not come back properly from that. So what did that look like? That looked like whatever I thought came out of my mouth immediately without any filter, because that frontal lobe was not working, which just was quite funny for everyone around me, but was really not a good thing. And I could not remember one thing from the next. I mean, I really did meet criteria. If someone was just looking at me and hadn't known I had just gone through basically a brain injury, they would have thought I had stage 1 Alzheimer's. And I started to exhibit those symptoms even before the detoxification, because there was an incident in which someone who I had met in my office, they came in and I didn't recognize their face. So it was really the cognitive toll of that was already showing itself. And then the acute insult from the detoxification was just way more than I could handle. So couldn't read anymore, gave up on reading. That's why I was listening to podcasts and came across Dom. Listened to many more podcasts about ketogenic therapy, trying to figure out how to do it, because back then there was nobody doing it for that purpose. It was all weight loss. It was the Jimmy Moore days, right, where everyone was just doing it for weight loss. And I fiddled with it, tried it for a month, couldn't quite get it right, dropped the carbohydrates even more, finally got it right. And I had a window where my lights turned back on, just like everybody says. And I had that brain energy type of thing. And I felt calm. And I was like, what is this? I didn't even realize I was anxious and overwhelmed, but clearly I must have been, being a psychotherapist, I had all these tools at my disposal, right? So DBT skills, CBT skills. And it wasn't until I felt that in my body and my brain that I was like, wow, I have really been working hard to manage this all the time, thinking that I was fine and I didn't have these kind of mood issues creeping up. But clearly I must, because it shouldn't be this hard. Here I am just sitting here feeling completely fine and good and not having to work at it, right? So I had that experience and I kept working with my ketogenic diet. And within a month, me, who just was never interested in doing any kind of exercise, ran out and joined a gym, that sort of thing. It was great. Gained more lean muscle, gained good weight, and as I went, I gained better and better cognitive function. As a result, my brain just started to heal, and I embarked on trying to figure out what else I could add to my ketogenic diet to make it work even better for me in terms of my cognitive function. Eventually went back to college, which was really scary because I was like, oh, I can't read very long, can I? And I worked my way up and I was able to do that and get a postgraduate certificate that I needed to bring this to my clients. Because when you are a psychotherapist and you are a good psychotherapist and you do use evidence-based treatments and you're using them with fidelity and people are not getting well, or they are getting, it's such small progress, or it's just such difficult progress, you really cannot sit across from them knowing that this treatment might really help them and not share it. And so I really had to pivot my entire practice just from an ethical standpoint, because I could no longer sit in psychotherapy sessions with people with a broken biopsychosocial model where this bio pillar is not even discussed and I'm not supposed to be allowed to talk about it. So that's pretty much my story.
Yeah, and I've never heard that story before, but I have sat in a room, an online room with you when we were doing the focus groups out for Metabolic Collective, and your passion came out. And now I totally understand where that passion is coming from, because that's an experience I had, except for when I was medicated, I was asleep all day long. I didn't even have those 3 hours of clarity to get anything done. So you certainly, though it's adjacent, understand what your patients are going through and can help them because of your own experience. So that's an incredible story, how much you healed yourself, and that it's a brain injury. And I never really thought about that before either. Like, detoxing off of these drugs is hurting your brain, and somehow you have to figure out how to heal it. So thank goodness you couldn't read anymore, because otherwise you wouldn't have maybe heard those podcasts and learned this and then paid it forward in the way that you have now with your career. But you said something, and I want to make sure that we talk about that, because a lot of people don't believe it. You talked about how at the time, or maybe you can say how long you've been on the ketogenic diet, but at the time it was all about weight loss. But you said you gained weight, and that's a lot of things that I hear from people, is that they don't want to try the ketogenic diet because they don't have any weight to lose. So what was that experience for you?
Yeah, so I was quite underweight when I started it. And I gained healthy weight. So, again, I didn't have anyone helping me with my macros. I didn't know how many calories I was supposed to eat. I started to eat and feel better, and have better energy and move more. And I think that I was just naturally, intuitively eating. But, for people who are concerned about losing weight, you just work with a professional and they give you the macros you need in order to keep that from happening. It's not difficult at all. But, back then there was nobody, I think, that was doing this, except probably maybe Georgia was doing this. But I didn't know Georgia back then.
Yeah, that's back when everybody was in their silos doing their own thing and nobody was talking to each other. So, and we both have our Bazooki awards behind us. So thank goodness for the Bazooki group for, helping facilitate getting everyone together to get this movement growing and out there. So now let's switch over a little bit to professional. How did you change? I mean, I love that you say that you recognize that. I can't imagine being in a professional space where your job is not doing what you think it's going to do. Like, you go into a professional field to heal people, to help people heal. And consistently, that's not happening. Everybody's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. It may not be in psychiatry or psychology or anything. Like, it could be any different field, but this keeps happening. And then there's this thing that comes in from the side door. Like, you find out about it accidentally. You recognize that as, I need to share this with my patients. And a lot of other people in the medical field don't do that. They kind of suppress that information and keep going with the status quo. So how were you able to do that? I mean, did you have any like backlash from, or were you working for yourself at the time? I don't know how that worked.
Yeah, I was in private practice. You know, again, when I was on those medications and I had those 3 hours, I was still very much kind of in survival mode. So I could not work for someone else because I would call in a lot. Like, I would be, I don't feel good today for 1,000, obvious reasons. And I would just kind of have to call in. And so it was good that I worked for myself. It was good I could come home in the middle of the day and lay down with my cat and take my medication. Like, I had to build my life around that. So I worked independently in private practice, but I was terrified. Terrified's probably a strong, well, no, I was worried. I was really worried that, because I'm a licensed mental health professional, that I have to stay in this very narrow scope about what I can discuss and not discuss. And so it was really a learning journey for me to figure out, okay, how can I bring this to clients? How can I bring this to patients in a way that keeps my license safe? And so I did a lot of things. And so one of the things I did was I went back to Maryland University of Integrative Health, or I went to them. They had a postgraduate certificate at the time in nutrition and integrative health. And I thought, okay, well, this is a college, and this will show that I am within scope about being able to talk about this, even if I don't necessarily have permission to do it as a psychotherapist. So I got that, and that program was very not useful for my ketogenic diet work. I learned some stuff about vitamins and minerals, and it had some good stuff in the very beginning. The nutritional biochemistry was very helpful to me, and the end was very helpful because there was this lovely integrative piece, and I had a professor who kind of understood what I was doing when I kept saying, well, but ketogenic therapy would do this, this, and this. And they were like, yes, but that wasn't part of the curriculum. The middle was completely useless, I thought. Please don't sue me, Maryland University. This is just my personal opinion about how it applied to what I wanted to do. But it's a very well-respected university. And so I got that, and that made me a little more confident, but I still was quite nervous. And then I also saw that there was an evergreen certification for psychotherapists, in which they can talk about nutrition and supplements as part of their CEUs. And I thought, okay, now wait a minute. If continuing education credits by National Board of Certified Counselors can be accredited for nutrition so that psychotherapists can talk about nutrition, then why can't I talk about the ketogenic diet? Because the research for the ketogenic diet is much more rigorous and much better than these terrible epidemiological studies that they keep pushing on me to tell people to, eat more fiber and all their vegetables and fruits. And so I decided, okay, well, I'll get that certification. That will protect me also, right? So I'm grabbing these certifications. And then I finally took Georgia's course. I think I was in the 3rd cohort of Georgia's training. And there was all these medical professionals and all these, I don't know if there was other psychotherapists in there. I believe there was, but there are all these people, and that was where I found my community, to where I was like, yes, it is safe for me to do this. This is up, this is coming. I can't ethically not do this. And I really had to say to myself, if I lose my license because I'm doing this, am I okay with that? And I decided I was. Ultimately, I was okay with it, that I would find something else to do, or I would find another way to make a living, or I would just focus on this, because I was quite sure that other people experiencing the benefits that I felt in my body would be seeking people out, and that I would eventually be okay.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. You basically put everything on the line to start this practice in this way, uh, which is incredible. I wish more people would do that, but we're not getting there. But slowly but surely, baby steps. So, how does your practice work?
Yeah, so I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Washington State. So people can come to me if I'm with their insurance carriers, and they can get this work with me done through insurance because I use my psychotherapy skills to help them implement the diet. I also initiate and monitor the diet from a nutrition standpoint for them. So it's kind of a package deal. So that's good. And I really like being able to take insurance because I think that helps with access. And then the other part of my practice is private consultation. And I see people from all over the world on Zoom, and I work with them that way as time zones allow and language differences allow. And so I find that that has increased access because there's quite a few countries in which people just truly cannot find a practitioner for this. So that's another great access piece. And then I also have an online program that is very useful also and has many people from all over the world in there. And that is quite useful and actually really wonderful because, there's lessons and they can kind of take the lessons and then they come on live Q&As with me and I answer questions. And it's a more extended program. So if it takes them a little while to get everything right, that's okay. They're not paying for private consultation constantly.
So that those are all things. Are they for a patient, someone who's going through the ketogenic diet, or is it for practitioners as well? Do you have a
Oh,
program for
yes, I
practitioners?
have one for psychotherapists also. So, yes, so that's a whole nother story. I don't
You've
know how many
decided to divide you. You've figured out how to divide yourself in many different
I
areas. It's
have.
pretty impressive how you've done
I
that. I'm sorry, I
have.
cut you off. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I'm all over the place. Georgia teases me when I see her at convention. She said, "You're everywhere, Nicole. You're everywhere," and she cracked me up when she said that because it kind of feels like it sometimes. So, I also have a psychotherapy training, continuing education, NBCC accredited. It's, I believe, 7 credits. It's an all-day training that we're working on putting, recording and making accessible on demand. But it is for psychotherapists. And the reason I made this because I was just regularly horrified by how many people were being told by psychotherapists, psychologists, marriage and, family therapists, all of them, that they were going to get an eating disorder if they did the ketogenic diet, or told that it wasn't healthy for them, or told that it's too restrictive, or told that they're going to get a heart attack or a stroke because of all that fat. Just really all of the miseducation or lack of education, or the absolute unabashed oozing of personal biases into the psychotherapy room, which in my day was not allowed. Nowadays they're a little looser in terms of self-disclosure and stuff, but just really some really unaware biases that psychotherapists were saying in these sessions. And I would know because I would hear them, with my own clients. And also, I've been a psychotherapist for many years, and I kind of know how it rolls in there. And so um, this training is for psychotherapists who want to learn how to ethically and professionally support individuals who are going to be using ketogenic therapies as a treatment for mental illness. And so we go through all of that stuff. They won't learn how to manage the diet or initiate the diet. And in fact, they're encouraged to stay out of the diet because they're not trained. But really to use their psychotherapy skills to assist individuals in learning how to adopt the diet, dealing with all the social pieces around it and the relational pieces around it and the planning. And so that is where the psychotherapy tools really just shine for people. So yes, I have that training as well. That's actually coming up.
Oh, that sounds really, really interesting because that's a piece that people don't really talk about. For whatever reason, they decide to go on a ketogenic diet. They don't think about the amount of like emotional stuff that they're going to have to go through.
Mhm.
So that's great. And then you're kind of doing this like grassroots thing too. Like hey, behind our doors in our sessions, we can kind of talk about this and get you to work on it, maybe implement an idea so that they can think of it on their own, or since they're not trained in nutrition, but implement that idea and let them start to kind of ruminate on it and then find a professional that can help them through it. So
Mhm.
I assume that's kind of that how that works.
Yeah. Well, my thought was that um, the more psychotherapists I train so that they understand what this intervention is, and the better they understand ketogenic diets as a bio pillar or a biological treatment in a biopsychosocial model of practice, that is one less individual who will be turned away or dissuaded from using a ketogenic diet in which that ketogenic diet might have saved their life or their quality of life.
Wow, that's amazing. there's, there's really nothing to say beyond that. That's just absolutely amazing. There's so many people out there who are helpless. And, thinking about getting into this conversation with you, I was reflecting on my own journey, how I didn't have the energy to even look up stuff to know. So we need people in your field who are like, here, let me help guide you over here. Because we're done. There's not a speck of energy within us to do it
Yeah.
for ourselves. So that you have these programs for people who are going through it, and then these programs for people who can help people go through it. It's a you're punching with both hands here. You're trying to knock it out on both sides, and it's just absolutely amazing. And as a person who went through it myself, I very much appreciate all that you're doing. And that's not even everything. You also, um, you you have a nonprofit that I understand that you've recently started, so because access is so very important to you. So I want to talk about the nonprofit, but then also you're very prolific in writing and researching and bringing case studies to improve everyone else's accessibility to the information. So you can pick either one. Let's talk about both of them. But you're just helping to just flood the science, flood us with information. And
Yeah.
while I'm sure that's a lot of work, it's needed. We kind of need to go back and cover all this past stuff that we're trying to work out of the room and put this new information out there. So please talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll start with the case studies. So um, in evidence-based treatment, there's a pyramid of evidence, and RCTs are, of course, considered the top of that pyramid. But building up in that pyramid are things like expert opinion, which was really already there in the research literature, but there really wasn't quite enough case studies on a lot of different kind of diagnoses. And ketogenic diets are starting to be talked about as a trans diagnostic intervention. And so we had those beautiful case reports from Chris Palmer and Dr. Westman and such for schizophrenia, but there was still a lot that could be written about that was happening every day in ketogenic clinician offices and coach offices, where people were spectacularly recovering with all kinds of diagnoses. And so I started a little case study group where we would write up these beautiful recovery stories and submit them for peer review. And they're quite rigorous. So there's baseline assessments, follow-up assessments, and ketones were confirmed, graphs of ketones and glucose. And we share these stories in order to kind of fill out that bottom part of the evidence-based pyramid. And I actually have a lovely one, a PTSD one, specific in peer review right now. And so those are actually very helpful. So I think about those as filling in that bottom part of the pyramid, doing what I can, because I'm not a researcher in a big university or anything, but I am a clinician and I do see people recover every day in beautiful fashion. And so that I can do, that I can share. But also I put those there for the families, because as someone who was looking for help, or able to look for help, and I'm sure you would have looked also, where you were at if you could at that time, they find these case studies when they do a Google search. These families and these individuals find these pieces, and I try to do really good case studies in which I'm talking about the macronutrient ratios. I'm talking about what foods were eaten. There's lots of clues in those case reports. Obviously it's so much better to just get your macros done by a professional and all that good stuff. But for families who are exploring and just trying to kind of figure out what would this look like, and those case studies I think could be very helpful. So that was just another way that I was kind of reaching out with that. And then the nonprofit is amazing. So like I said, I have this brain fog recovery program. And everybody asked me, Nicole, is this a metabolic psychiatry program or is this a brain fog program? Because my symptoms are way worse than brain fog. And I just have to tell them the story that when I was doing research for this program, I was way ahead of my time. And people were angry that I would even suggest that nutrition could help them with their symptoms, let alone put anything in remission. So I just rebranded it that way in a nice, neutral way that nobody would get angry or offended at. And I just went along my way and kept offering it. But yes, I have people with all kinds of diagnoses in that program doing very, very well. So I have this great program, and it's tried and true and tested, and people do really well in it. And after I worked with Lauren Kennedy West on the Living Well with Schizophrenia YouTube channel at that time, she made this kind of beautiful recovery. And I got a big influx of people. And before I even had that influx of people, I had started the nonprofit because I would encounter people who would want to do the ketogenic diet, but really were quite low income, or, in a different country where the conversion rate would not have made sense, to come see me. So I would just quietly put them through the nonprofit, and I would work with them because I really do not like turning people away from this. It really makes me quite uncomfortable. I really think that this is something that, while it's fantastic if the hospitals and the clinics and the medical system would adopt, and I think there are people that really do need to do it through there potentially, maybe because of a lot of different medications or some complicated situations. For many, many people, this does not need to be gatekept. Is that the word? This does not need to be a gatekeeping situation in which they should not or cannot have access to it because of finances. Like this is potentially how your body wants to function. Let's give it what it needs to feel better. So I would put them in, and then that happened with the YouTube channel, and I got lots and lots of people asking, and that population, so many of the people who watch that channel have serious mental illness, which means many of them are on either government disability or they are low income or underemployed because they are not doing well, and they can't keep a job very well, or it's too difficult. And so I kept bringing them into my nonprofit, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this funded because, I'm not having as much private consultation hours. And so then I just kind of woke up one morning, basically almost literally, and was like, I'm going to figure out how to fund this. I'm going to figure out how to expand access to this in a way that can sustain, that can let me keep on keeping on, and also can give everybody access that kind of wants to do this. And the population that comes to me to the nonprofit have already decided that they absolutely want to try this treatment. So they are quite decided, and they just want access. And so that's what I do.
I appreciate that a lot. I feel the same way. This isn't something that should be for the people who can afford it. It's for everyone. And so finances should not be a limiting factor on getting healthy and having someone to help you. But I am a little confused about it. So I feel like it's maybe like there's two parts to it. So there's the part where I guess a patient can come in and apply to go through the program, and then that program, is that your online program or okay?
Yeah.
And then the other half of it is the fundraising half. So how do you do the fundraising part, and then how do people get in? So it's
Oh,
another
yeah.
cheesy question, but
No.
I want to understand it fully.
Yes,
So
it's all confusing. So you're
you're
not alone.
again, like Dr. Eve says, you're everywhere. So we got
Yeah.
to bring you in a little bit.
So I have my little my practice, my for-profit practice, and that I see individual consultation through that, and I have an online program, the Brain Fog Recovery Program, that people can join at full cost for that program. And then through the nonprofit, I will give them access into that exact same high quality program that my for-profit runs, and actually supports the nonprofit in its own way by providing that infrastructure. So donations actually go to direct service hours that I can give to the nonprofit population wanting in, and not of it, it's not all going to, like, computer and technology stuff, because that's already taken care of. So that's what that looks like. So there is a for-profit program that I allow nonprofit in for partial scholarship or full scholarship, and they get the same great access and the same great experience as the for-profit people.
And the other facet of that is fundraising. You're not like selling something or whatever. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm taking donations. It's open.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been playing with ideas like, what are some digital assets that I can develop in my for-profit that will support my nonprofit? So I'm always scheming, trying to figure out, like, how can I increase access by increasing the fundraising? So that's on my mind lately. But yes, it's fundraising. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a lot of grants, right? I'm gonna do a lot of grant writing. So I taught myself grant writing, and I have submitted a lot of grants since I kind of decided to make this public in, I believe it was April, and grant writing is very difficult and very competitive. And so really it's quite a bit of heavy lifting, as some of my nonprofit friends tell me. That's heavy lifting, Nicole. Maybe you should put that down for now and just focus on individual donations, only because every time I write a grant, I have to educate the foundations that I'm asking money from about what the heck this is. And so there's lots of other programs that they get that that they would want to fund. And while at first I was thinking, well, I'm providing a service by educating these foundations that this is on the scene, and they're going to have to get on board, and they're going to have to figure out that this is really useful for what they claim to support. It's also, like my friend said, a heavy lifting. And so it was really a beautiful thing when I got a matching grant from Bazooki Group, because we did this matching program, and I just felt so supported in this work, because people just came out of nowhere with matching grants and really showed that they really wanted people to have access to this. So yeah, that's how we're running. So when you guys see those matching grants, if you want to help, that is the best way. And also, I'm also thinking of doing some fun pledging type things. So except with maybe some metabolic challenges. So remember, like the walkathons and so much giving per mile, that might be a fun thing to do that I'm working on bringing in as a fundraising strategy. And it also really is good for people who truly want to advocate for this. So when you've recovered, or you've seen someone you love recover, you really want to talk about that experience, and you want to help make it accessible for others. That's why so many of us kind of move into this space so passionately. And so I was thinking it would be really fun to do metabolic challenges, and instead of donations per mile walked or whatever, although that could be a metabolic challenge, but different things that they could do. And then they would be able to talk about their stories, and they would be able to utilize their own social support networks in order to fundraise for access.
That's interesting, because I think you could probably brainstorm over and over and over again about different ways to get that to happen. But I think probably just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing and it needs some funding, people will do it. And I know that you did just recently do that. So I think people will do that because they do feel that passion, and then you have something to offer. We trust you, and here you go, take it
Yeah.
and use it and help other people. So I don't know that it needs to be some big glorious thing, but uh, whatever you come up with in the future, I'm sure is going to be great. However, the way you did it before also, I think, works too. There's a lot of
Working.
people out there who want to find a place to share this information, the advocacy piece that we were talking about before we even started. And that's a simple way to be an advocate is, okay, I don't have the time to do it myself, but let me throw a little bit at Nicole, who can do something with it. Let me put it in her nonprofit and let her turn it around and make it something amazing,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful thing. There's just so much. I don't know how the person you talked about at the beginning of this conversation is the person I'm looking at right now and talking to right now, because you are doing just so much. And I know we're only really just skimming the surface of all the things that you do. We're trying to pack it all into one thing, but it's amazing to me that you were so ill, just so ill before, and have been able to turn it around, and then not only turn it around for yourself, be able to read again, be able to research, be able to help people, be able to dedicate time to writing grants, because yeah, that's got to be awful. And then like still have all this energy left over to be very passionate about what you do and to share what you do. So again, I'm going to throw a lot of appreciation to you, because you're doing work that's changing and helping and giving hope to all of those who are hopeless and helpless. And I appreciate that so much, because I know what it feels like to be there also.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I want to make sure we tell everybody how they can get in touch with you. So where can people find you?
So, mentalhealthketo.com. That was another thing I did to kind of get ready for what I do. So back before Metabolic Mind had all their amazing education resources, I would write for my blog, trying to get better at articulating the underlying mechanisms by which this might work. So there's this blog with a bunch of old articles on there, and there's a contact form there for me. That is the easiest way to get a hold of me. I will say that if someone is wanting access to the program through the nonprofit, it's really important that we keep those inquiries separate. So, and I'll help you do that if you contact me in the contact form. But nonprofit at mentalhealthketo.com is where you inquire about partial or full scholarships into the program. And then if you want to just join the online program, that is Nicole at mentalhealthketo.com. Or if you want private consultation, it's Nicole at mentalhealthketo.com.
So basically go to mentalhealthketo.com. It'll be there.
Basically, yeah.
Everything's there. Yeah, I was looking at it to prepare. Everything that we need is there. And also you're on social media, but that's all listed on the website as well. So everybody make sure you're checking out Nicole, because she's doing great things out there. So I always ask a final question of all my guests. What key insight can you share to help others write their keto biography?
Yeah, I actually have I have a lot of advice for that, actually. So, write your story from where you want it, how you want it to look like at the end. So often when we go to heal, or we're trying to figure out how to heal, it's so easy to hyper focus on what you cannot do or where you are struggling. That really is where the attention goes. And in my own story, remember I said there was just this time period where you just kind of let go and you're like, I am where I am, and that's got to be okay for now. Sometimes I think that opens space to even explore or find something like the ketogenic diet. So, and I would think about how I would, of course, miss the brain I had in early graduate school, right? I would miss that. But also I would think about what I wanted. Oh, I would really like more energy. I have very low energy. Someday when I get better, I'm going to be more athletic, or I could imagine myself in those places, or I will have more patience with my children, or I will be a better mom, or I will be, there's these different things. And so really kind of thinking about your personal why for getting well, I think is a really important part of writing your keto biography, and knowing your scientific why. So I always tell people, know your personal why, know what you're fighting towards or for, or allowing in the possibility of is probably a better dynamic to have in your healing. And also know your scientific why, because I think that helps keep you grounded in why you're doing and making the changes you need in order to work your way towards where you want to go.
So define like a scientific why, what's an example of a
Oh,
scientific why?
so when I talk to people about why the ketogenic diet might help treat their particular diagnosis, I use the same sorts of language that doctors use to tell people why a prescription might work, even though we now know much of what they're saying may not be accurate. But giving people that scientific why to the best of our research knowledge can be really helpful. So me making this choice to eat this amount of carbohydrates at this meal is helping me reduce my neuroinflammation, is turning on gene expression that increases my glutathione and will help my oxidative stress, is keeping my brain in a healthy glucose balance so that I can upregulate my GABA, which will make me feel less overwhelmed and make me feel better. So, I mean, knowing your scientific why am I doing this? Yes, it's because I want to be a better partner and do better at work and have a happy, healthy brain and a good mood. Yes. And there are real reasons that drive why that might happen if I make this decision.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's like I'm going to do this diet because I'm going to lose weight, but honestly, you're not doing it because you're losing weight. You're doing this, and this, and the reason that's happening is because you're healing very specific things inside.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get it. I just wanted to make sure I got it before we signed off.
Yeah.
That I love that. Focusing on a why and focusing on a future you that you can be, like that's and in those dark spaces, in those dark times, it's really hard to see those things. You actually spoke about it with your own journey. You just kind of thought you'd be on medicine for the rest of your life. So it wasn't until you made that switch to say, well, I can't do this anymore. I need to vision myself as who I was before the meds were in there. That's when all of it started to come into place. And I think that's an important message to get out there. So you might be in a place where you can't visualize it, you can't see it, but it's there. Find that one thing and just really focus on it, and the rest of it will open up as well.
Yeah. When you're in that dark space, you stop remembering, or it's difficult to access thoughts that how I am in this moment does not necessarily mean this is my forever.
Yeah, you're
Because
absolutely right.
bodies heal, brains heal, new therapies come into the world, better options will show themselves. And so when you're in that dark place, you can't remember that your now is not your forever. And so it's okay. And that's okay, because that's just kind of where you're at sometimes. But when you're not in that super dark place, it's okay to think, gosh, when you see someone riding a bike down the street that's happy and that has energy, instead of going to the place of, oh, I can't do that, that'll never be me, I would really love to do that someday. I would love to be able, imagine how that feels. Imagine the wind in my hair as, I'm on the bike, and the smell of the flowers as I'm going down the path. And I would really like that someday. That's possible for me someday, possibly. So just opening that up, the psychology of that, what that does to your brain, and your metabolism is much different than that's not for me. I'll never have that. Imagine that, right? Because these thoughts, they are metabolic information to your brain and your body. So being able to open it to that is a movement towards healing. It's not magical thinking, and it's not just positive thinking, like that's some kind of bad thing nowadays we say, right? But it's it's a metabolic intervention to be open and hopeful if that's possible for you in the moment.
Absolutely. Hope is a driver. It's a driving force. And when you lose that hope, it's just hard to overcome that. So having even just one little thread of hope can open up the world and open up your brain and how it works. I absolutely love it. This is a great place to end our conversation. Thank you, Nicole, so much for joining Ketobiography today. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for sharing that part of your story that I hadn't heard of before. It really makes me understand where you're coming from a lot more, and I know that other people will feel that as well. So thank you again for joining Ketobiography. See y'all next time. Bye.